Welcome to Unsilent with your hosts Dave and Brian. This is not another current events podcast. We're digging deeper, diagnosing, and discussing what's really going on today, how we got here, and providing observations for future generations.
Welcome to Unsilent. We're Brian and Dave. We'd love to hear where you think we got it right and where you think we got it wrong. And you can do that on Rumble. You can do that on our website, unsilentpodcast.com, or a whole variety of social channels. So, Brian, I hear you have a surprise for me today. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, I'm
What
going
do
to
you
throw
got,
a couple of
brother?
things at you and see, and just, I would love to get your reactions. I've compiled a couple of articles I'm going to read here to you, and you might know about some of this, some of it you might not. And again, for those who don't know, how would you describe the depth of show prep we go into for these things?
I just found out about a minute and a half ago that you had two questions for me. We had, and just in case anybody thinks there's any kind of conspiracy here, I have no idea what Brian's about to say.
Right,
I have no idea whether I'll agree with it or disagree. I have no idea. So
Dave
this
has
show is
no
meant
idea
to
what's
be a
coming.
discussion.
Dave has no idea what's coming at him.
I have no idea.
We occasionally plan some stuff, but we don't go over talking points. We don't you're going to talk about this, I'm going to talk about that. That's not how we do this. We put a little bit of thought into topics, and then we just kind of show up and we both just kind of share our thoughts. So it's important that I think people, they don't understand or they don't believe that we just have this scripted out. And probably they understand. They've listened.
I have no idea what's coming next.
All right. So there was a Freedom of Information Act. That there was a lawsuit, a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit. And when the federal government responded, they admitted that in 2023 alone, they flew in 320,000 illegal aliens in the United States. So this is on top of the however many millions who have walked across the border. They flew in 320,000 in the United States into 43 airports. They won't say where the airports are because of a security risk, which is laughable. Anyhow, so that's kind of the beginning of this. Is we're not only are the borders open, but we're actively bringing people here on taxpayer dime. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing I'm going to read to you is, this is from, I think I'm saying this right, Kobeissi letter. It's spelled Kobeissi. I think it's Kobeissi. I don't know for sure.
Okay.
This is an X post, formerly Twitter. They put this out on March 8th. And, every month or 6 weeks, whatever it is, the government, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, puts out stats on how many people file for unemployment, who's working, who's not working, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Okay, so a few weeks ago, I mentioned to you that something like the last 9 or 10 consecutive months, they've revised down the previous month. So they'll say, $400,000 were created in January, and then in February, when that number comes out, they'll say, well, actually, January wasn't that good. It was only 300,000. Right. Okay. So we talked about that for a minute, but these guys are Wall Street analysts for stock traders. That's who the Kobeissi letter is speaking to traders so they can make informed decisions about stock purchases and sales they do. Okay. So it says stat of the day, and this is from this is March 8th of this year, 2024. Stat of the day. Over the last 12 months, the U.S. has actually lost 284,000 full-time jobs. But the headline jobs number says we've added jobs for 38 straight months. How is this possible? Over the last 12 months, these full-time jobs have been replaced by 921 part-time jobs, according to Zero Hedge. Zero Hedge, again, is online newsletter talking to Wall Street traders.
Yep.
The true number of workers employed in the United States right now is at its lowest since May of 2023. Last month, payrolls jumped by 275,000, but the total number of individuals employed fell by 184,000. So their point here is working multiple jobs is what they call the new quote unquote normal.
Yeah.
All right. So we have headlines that the economy is going great. We're adding jobs, 38 straight months. Biden's patting himself on the back. No president has done what I've done, and nobody could have brought us back from the brink like me. Meanwhile, The full-time jobs are going away and part-time jobs are taking the place. That's the second piece. Now, the third piece I'm going to throw at you is the one that is just absolutely blew my mind. This is from Zero Hedge, and this is on X, again, March 8th, 2024. Crazy stats about the true state of labor market you won't hear anywhere else. Number one, in the past year, the U.S. has lost 284,000 full-time jobs. These have been replaced with 921,000 part-time jobs. I just said that a minute ago.
Yep.
Number two, in February alone, a record 1.2 million foreign-born jobs were added. In the past 3 months, a record, excluding the COVID crash, $2.4 million, 2.4 million native jobs have been lost, including 494,000 jobs lost in February. So 1.2 million foreign-born jobs were added in February. In the past 3 months, a record 2.4 million native-born jobs have been lost. So you tracking? We're adding 1.2 million jobs for foreigners. We're
One's going one
losing.
direction, one's going the other direction.
Yep. Okay. Most shocking. Since May 2018, there have been 0 jobs created for native-born Americans. All jobs in the past 6 years have gone to immigrants, legal and illegal.
Wow.
So when I read this stuff, I think back to one of the things that was a big topic when we studied the Revolutionary War when I was in school, which I don't know, Revolutionary War is probably 7th grade, 8th grade, 10th grade. I don't know, somewhere in there. One of the things that stuck with me to this day was this whole taxation without representation thing.
Sure.
Which led to the Boston Tea Party, and they were pissed because King George was taking their money in taxes, but they weren't really getting anything for their tax money. It was not a good investment. There was no ROI.
That's right.
And it feels to me like that's 100% applicable in many ways, not just immigration, but many ways today.
Sure.
Like the middle class, upper middle class shoulders a tremendous amount of the tax burden.
Yep.
And then we're literally bringing in 320,000 people. We're flying them in from out of the country. Forget the ones who are crossing. We're actively flying them in, and we've created 0 jobs for native-born Americans since May of 2018, according to Zero Hedge. Now, Zero Hedge is not like
they're not a fringe conspiracy site,
conspiracy kind of thing at all.
No.
I don't even know their politics. I do know that they're a trading newsletter kind of a thing. It's not about politics so much as is understanding the economic fundamentals that's going on, so people can make decisions on how stocks they buy and sell and whatever. So if the tax dollars are going to import people through air travel, and to put things in context, 320,000 is how many people have come in. 102,000 is how many Governor Abbott has bussed from Texas to New York City.
Yeah, that was my first question. Wait a minute. Did Greg Abbott pay for all of those? Because, to listen to the news, the greatest human rights tragedy of all time or violation of all time is Greg Abbott putting folks on buses and saying, where do you want to go? So you're
those are all
telling me that
people
Greg
who
Abbott didn't do this.
Yeah.
So you're saying Greg Abbott did.
I don't know that they all walked across the border. Some of them may have been flown in from Guatemala or whatever to a Texas airport, then whatever. But going back to my earlier thought, which is this is exactly taxation without representation. The tax money is going to bring other people in to make their lives better. The people actually footing the bill are not even an afterthought. They're I don't know how you describe it. They're
not considered. They're
not
even
contempt. Like they're I don't know.
Well, so I mean, they're not even considered as a decision-making factor, and the reason the people that it affects are not considered as a decision-making factor is because they can be lied to in sufficiently convincing ways, and a lie can be a lie of omission or commission, right? I mean, it can be both ways. So the bottom line is that what we're talking about right now is something that 98% of the people, wouldn't know, even though, it's just a fringe in terms of the number of people know about that kind of thing that the government is doing. And I don't think there's any question that the government's been flying those people in. I mean, this are from the government's own statistics. I read some articles about that, and it is, government policy that's doing this. Now,
Yeah.
if the if the American people would know about that, they would probably be, other than the political geeks that pay attention to this kind of stuff, they would probably be rightly unhappy about that. But the spin, so there's two levels here, it seems to me. The first level, the top level, is one where those in power, the elites, think they can say basically whatever they want. They can spin whatever narrative they want, whether it's a narrative about jobs being created, whether it's a narrative about who's getting the jobs, whether it's a narrative about full-time versus part-time. They can spin a narrative such that people will believe something that's not true, because none of this
Right.
could happen if that narrative wasn't there. So that's number one. Number two, given that is the case, given that these things are happening, and we've got objective data that says they are happening, what does it mean that the elites, if you will, the deep state, the power brokers, the people that wield all the influence in the country, want to do this? What does it mean? I mean, why would they do this? Other than, I mean, I'm a pretty simple guy. It seems to me that undermining the kind of core basic, American values of hard work. If you're going to immigrate, you go through a process, and you do the things to prove that you're not worthy is probably the wrong word, but that you should be an American, that you follow the laws, that all of those things are not as important as changing the power structure in the country, and defunding is the wrong word, but depowering the average American citizen that has lived here and has worked hard to be, productive in their lives.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that stuff. One of the first things that, on the comments here, the first thing is disbelief. So one of the first
Sure.
comments I see on this thing is somebody's like, this is a bunch of nonsense. Where are you getting those statistics? And Zero Heads writes back and says, the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Yeah, that fringe organization, right?
So the first thing is our first reaction is utter disbelief.
Can't be, yeah.
Our second reaction is that can't be true. Going back to what you and I have been talking about for the last few weeks or months, which is they wouldn't do that. I mean, they wouldn't do that. Like, who would do that? Why would they do that? That makes no sense.
Right.
And we are relying upon this historically useful line that won't be crossed, because they wouldn't do that. And they wouldn't have done this in 1978 or 1998 or 2008. 100%. I fully believe that they would not have done that then.
Yep.
It also reminds me of one of the recurring themes of things you and I talk about is we have to have a boogeyman, whether it was, the Native Americans, whether it was the Jews in Germany, like there's all these things. There's a boogeyman. And when there's a boogeyman right now, it's what are they? They're Christian conservative. Is it Christian conservatives? Is it what they're called?
Yeah, Christian white conservatives, males.
White Christian conservatives. So they are so bad that even though we're bringing in people and giving those people jobs who've never paid taxes and who are walking across the border or being flown across the border, being given cash or medical benefits for fun things like gender reassignment surgeries or whatever kinds of injuries they may have or whatever. And even though, maybe 1 or 2% of the people come over might want to blow up buildings and like do us harm, but it's all worth it.
Yeah.
As long as we can put out of power the white Christian nationalists, or I think is what they're calling them now.
Well, yeah, Christian nationalism is a big boogeyman right now. Absolutely.
Yeah. So whatever the consequences are of this, what you and I would probably call, what I would call utterly stupid policies.
Yes,
whatever
absolutely.
the consequences of that are, pale in comparison to the benefit of dethroning the white Christian nationalists, because they're such evil people and they can't be trusted to help like govern and make decisions, that they need to go no matter what the cost. And it feels to me like this is a crystal clear example for me. So if I was talking to somebody who was a skeptic about you and I talking about these things happening in cycles and
Sure.
like, come on, we're more sophisticated than we were 300 years ago and 500 years ago and 1,000 years ago. Come on, this is all nonsense. There's happenstance, there's whatever.
Sure.
But this is like a great example of like the taxation without representation. This is the same complaint they had.
Sure.
Is we're going to take your money, we're going to give it to somebody else, and the same mindset and approach to anything we got to do to get rid of the Jews is fine. Like whatever the consequences are, they're nothing compared to leaving the Jews with power. And
Right.
it's just the same thing to me. It just feels the same thing with new heroes, villains, scapegoats, and victims.
Sure it is. It's the, I mean, you could go back to feudalism and say it's the same thing. It's the kings and the lords versus the peasants who do all the work. You want to go to fiction, and was it President Snow in the capital city in Hunger Games? Was that Hunger Games versus the districts?
Yeah.
It's that human narrative playing out again, and it's as simple as this. Americanism, we talked about Americanism 1 or 2 episodes ago. Americanism, the empowerment of the individual, the empowerment of the family, the empowerment of the locality, of the city, of the decentralized government, that is a threat to centralized power. So I think we can boil this down in a very pretty simplistic way, and as you're saying, that has played out over the millennia. And that is that there are those who want centralized power. And the traditional American model of decentralized power, the power being with the people, that the government is of, for, and by the people, is an impediment to that. So what do? We have to bring in people, and we have to give authority and resources to people that don't necessarily hold these beliefs. That the people that are being brought in, there, as you say, there's some of them, statistically speaking, there's some bad people in there. I mean, I don't care. I don't care who they are. I don't care what color they are. I don't care where they're from.
Cohort you bring in 10 million people of 1,000 or so are going to be not very good people.
Yeah, you bring in 10 million Amish. I don't think there are 10 million Amish. There's going to be some Amish killers in there, right? So people might say, "Well,
has there ever been an Amish serial killer, Dave? Do you think there's ever been one Amish serial killer?
I haven't, but I'm going on the statistics here, Brian.
Okay, gotcha. All right, I got you. I'm tracking.
So the point being, so folks might say, well, yeah, but you guys you're the out crowd. You're the Christian conservative males, and so therefore you're in the out crowd. So of course you're complaining about this. Well, look, here's the deal. The threat is not just who we are as Christian conservative males. It's what we believe.
Yeah.
What we believe is the threat. And the belief is that Washington, D.C. shouldn't have all the power, that Dave and Brian in Arizona and Washington should be able to, for the most part, to make our own decisions about our lives, our families, or what we do for a living and all that. We shouldn't have a whole bunch of interference from these folks. And that's a threat. That is a direct threat to their ability to control economies and control people movements and to control everything. So it's as simple as a power struggle between the people. And the United States is demonstrably and unquestionably, by people of moderate intelligence and goodwill, is demonstrably the best thing that's ever come around in terms of of a structure and a system in the world. There's no question.
And moving people out of poverty into very
absolutely
beneficial lifestyle.
Yeah, not only here, but because of our influence worldwide. And again, for those that are well, what about? Sure, we're not perfect. We haven't done everything right. We've done lots of wrong things, but we've done better than everybody else. So,
in a much shorter amount of time.
Yeah, exactly. So at the end of the day, what you have is people seeing an opportunity, and I think, Brian, you mentioned that this probably wouldn't have happened in the 70s or the 80s. So why wouldn't it have happened in the 70s or 80s? And here's my thesis on that. The reason it wouldn't have happened then is because we weren't in a crisis era then. So everybody wasn't just running around like crazy. What Rahm Emanuel, the former chief of staff to Obama, said, don't let a good crisis go to waste, right?
Yeah.
And so the people that are in power are not letting a good crisis go to waste.
Yeah, it's funny. I was listening to a Neil Howe interview the other day, and so for those of you listening, he wrote the book, The Fourth Turning. He wrote the book Generations. Him and his partner that wrote those two books coined the phrase millennial, speaking of the millennial generation. And he's the one that really first introduced me to this cyclical pattern of
Me
these
too.
crisis eras that Dave's referring to. And he was talking about boomers, and boomers are like at the powers. They have the most influence and the most power right now. Boomers do, right? And he was talking about, he was quoting John McCain, who said, according to Neil Howe, everything boomers touch is more meaningful but less effective. And and I thought that was a fantastic encapsulation of what we're experiencing. So the boomers, because of the what they call the constellation of generations. And again, if you want to dive into stuff, read the books. They're fantastic. I think they're really, really awesome books.
Yeah.
But he explains, like, whenever the boomer archetype comes to power, like we have these crisis eras because they're not great at some things. Like each generation has their pros, their benefits, and then things they're good at and things they're not good at. Boomers make things meaningful because they're rebelling against their parents and grandparents who put together these institutions, and they're basically rebelling against that. And they want to bring meaning to everything, but the stuff they put in place really does not function very well.
It doesn't work well.
That's like collectively speaking, I know your mom and your grandma's probably different if you're listening right now, but I'm not saying each individual, but collectively speaking, this is a trademark of that archetype of generation. Is there's a lot of spirituality, and things have to have meaning, and we have to have purpose, but they just don't work very well. Or like a patent come along and things work pretty well. He forces things to work pretty well. It's a difference in that kind of thing. So this evolution happens. Again, I agree with you. It couldn't have happened 20, 30 years ago for sure. First of all, we still had a great deal of pride in what we had accomplished as a country. We weren't looking for things to tear each other down. But here's I think maybe one of the most fascinating pieces of watching this all unfold in real time is the very people who criticize what they would say are, white patriarchal dominant forces, whatever. For example, if you look at the horrific things that no doubt happened to Native Americans as just onslaught of people coming from Europe and Central, different parts of the world were coming in, just overran them. Like they just overran them.
Yeah.
If you look at the way that they criticize those people and how they're doing things, the people doing the criticizing today are displaying the exact same behaviors. And I would challenge anyone to come and explain to me how they're doing anything different than what was done to the Jews in 1930s Germany, like with this new, what I keep forgetting what they call us, Christian nationalists.
Well, Christian nationalism,
so it's not Christians. It's not nationalists. It's the Christian nationalists. When you put it all together, they're the real problem, and they're the ones who create all these issues we have, which is exactly the same stuff Hitler was saying about the Jews, and exactly the stuff that people used to justify the things that they were doing to Native Americans, and just the same stuff they were doing to justify how they treated black people in the Jim Crow era. Is they demeaned them, and they had done something bad enough that we could our vengeance was justified, or we were told by our creator that we are superior and whatever we want to do is fine. And I would challenge anyone to explain to me how the people complaining and who are in charge of this righteous movement to correct things aren't doing exactly the same shit that the people they complain about did.
Well, and there's a template there, and you mentioned it. So let me just name the pieces of the template. So the first piece of the template is the underlying motivation. We want power. You have it. So there's the motivation. So that's that's the why. In business and in leadership. What's your why? Why do you do it?
Right.
So there's the why. We want power. You have it. Number two, we got a label. We got to come up with a label. So it doesn't matter what it is. You just have to come up with a label. There's always a label.
Yep.
And number three, we have to come up with a series of things they might be bad things, but they're not everything, but come up with a subset of things about these people that we just labeled that have the power that we can say are bad. And so therefore, you are this label. Here's these bad things. Therefore, you need to give up whatever power you've got, or we will
Right.
take it from you by force. This is the
Yeah.
same pattern. So you can go back to ancient times and say, well, it was the divine right of kings. We have the power because God granted us the power, and therefore what we say is correct. And you are the peasants. So therefore, you're labeled as peasants. You clearly do. You live in mud, and you do well. Yeah, but you're the king. Well, it doesn't matter. Stop making excuses. You live in mud and huts, so you're bad. Therefore, we must have the power. This same narrative plays out over and over and over. You just change the labels, change who the people are. It wouldn't matter if if the power in America right now were held by Smurfs, short blue people. If they had all the power, the
Yeah.
narrative would be the same, and the process of depowering them would be the exact same process.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. The only thing I would not even disagree, but I would alter a little bit is I've been thinking about this. Like, what are the drivers for this? And of course, power is one of them.
Yep.
I would also add money to that, but
But
money
money
gets
is
you
power.
power. So
Yeah, money
so
is
I
power.
I I agree with that. I
Yep.
would also augment it a little bit and add influence or instilling your ideology, which
Sure.
again leads to getting
That's power.
power. I'm not saying that doesn't lead to
Yep.
power. Also status, which
Yep.
implies power. And here's the one maybe that is a little bit different than the others, but still it implies power, and that is hubris. If
Sure.
they think that they're like God, then that's
Yeah.
the ultimate power, right?
Right.
So this is a list I've been kind of, as I'm like listening to talking points on different news channels, stuff like that. It's like, we're always looking for like, why is this happening? Well, I think it's a confluence of things. I don't think it's one thing. I don't think it's one entity driving it all who wants power. There's
Yeah.
plenty of people who just want to get rich.
Sure.
And there's plenty of people who want to have a legacy that they were the ones that saved the United States from the evil Christian nationalists. And,
Yes.
Joy Reid will have a headstone that reads, "She saved us from the Christian nationalists." And maybe that's what she drives her, or status. And there's a lot of hubris in DC. It just feels like these
Yeah.
people are
Yeah.
just, they
Yeah.
feel they're just, they're disgusted to be surrounded
They're
by,
above it all.
by
Yeah.
by people like us,
Yeah.
and that's one of the reasons I want to do this podcast with you, is to explain to Kenny G in the future, like, if we do get decimated, I don't think we were that bad of people.
Right. Right.
I think we were okay. All right. So the next thing I want to throw at you, same interview I heard Neil House say that quote about John McCain, and this, I gotta be honest with you, this really kind of shook me a little bit, because I've had steadfast beliefs in this my entire life.
Yeah.
But he was quoting a guy named Carl Becker, which I've never heard of, by the way. But and he was quoting this guy Carl Becker around 1940. And here's what Neil House said that Carl Becker said: "Democracy works best when there's really nothing to talk about. Works great for," and so that was his quote. And then Neil Howe went on to say, "It works great for things like how wide should sidewalks be? What's what kind of stuff like that, minor incidental things. It's great for stuff like that, but not fundamental things, because the other side will never agree on the big stuff." And I've been thinking
Interesting.
about that. It's like, you know what? I don't know that I could say definitively that he's wrong. Like these crisis eras, maybe part of why they come up is because democracy works for that 60, 70-year period where the big stuff's been kind of sussed out, and we've kind of, always through force historically. He
Sure.
mentioned in that interview, every total war has happened during a fourth turning, and every fourth turning's had a total war. So
Yep.
we got that
Yep.
to look forward to. But once you get the big meaty stuff taken care of, democracy is great.
Yeah.
But I've been thinking about this. Like, I cannot honestly imagine a scenario where Ted Cruz and Ilhan Omar would compromise on stuff, because these things are
Mhm.
fundamentally at
Yeah.
odds with each other. They're not
Yeah.
they're not even kind of sort of parallel. They are absolutely at odds with each other. Either
Yeah.
you want to bring in illegals from out of the country and fly them in on the taxpayer dime and give them the jobs and give them the benefits of the free healthcare and things like that, or you don't. And you say
Right.
there's a finite number of people who can come in, and the people paying the bill ought to get most of the reward of that kind of stuff. And you can't compromise. It's either
Yeah.
one or the other.
Well, it seems, if we go back to what Howe and Strauss say in the original book, and then later on, one of the things that's fascinating about that is that they claim, and I think it's true, I believe it, that each of the American eras between crisis have been a certain type of republic. So there
Yeah.
was the first American Republic was the one formed at the inception of the country. The
Yep.
second one was the one formed at the Civil War. The third one
Yep.
was the one formed after World War II. And
Yep.
even though there is a continuity between those, there's distinct sort of a distinct feel and distinct attributes of each of those. Now, what happens in each of those crisis eras, therefore, is a big question, a huge question that, and this is, I think, what you're talking about. There's a huge question that gets settled by force, and that gets
Yes.
settled by a relatively few number of people, that direct the great number of people. So the question during the inception of the country is, will we be ruled by a foreign monarchy, or will we be a self-governing new type of rulership here? The question during the second one, obviously the Civil War, slavery, will we be a country that respects all people, or will we be this kind of bifurcated, apartheid type of country? The third one was the idea of globalism and the idea of American, supremacy and dominance in the world, and some other questions as well. But so what you have is, you got big questions that are solved by force, that are not solved really democratically. And
Right.
then you have, following that, okay, we solve that, we have our belief set, now let's get around to filling potholes and, deciding things
Yeah.
demographically. So
Yeah.
another, example of that is this idea that we had, and the Constitution is a fascinating document, because it's ridden through each of these three republics that we've had so far. And I think we're
Yeah.
probably on the verge of the fourth American Republic, whatever
Yeah.
that
Sure.
looks like. And, the
How's your
Constitution,
Mandarin, by the way? Are you good at the Mandarin Chinese? Are you are
I'm
you are you are
afraid
you fluent?
I have Google Translate, Brian. So
Oh, perfect. We
I
don't,
have
we don't
Google
need, okay, yeah,
Translate,
perfect.
and I'm getting TikTok any day now, so that I can communicate directly with Beijing. So,
Perfect. All
but
right,
that's
perfect.
the difference. I think that's what you're talking about, is these great questions that are solved not democratically, but are solved by force and followed by democracies.
Yeah, yeah, the way I've been kind of, again, this really, it really bothered me, and I've kind of come to grips with it now, and I agree with a very similar way you're describing it. For me, it's like, yes, these big questions get answered, but also a fundamental set of values is instilled,
Yes, yes,
right?
yeah, that's
So,
right.
for example, looking at post Civil War, there was no income tax even.
Right.
That was not in at the 1874 or something like that, or somewhere around there was when
Yeah.
the first income tax was. Well, let me rephrase this: the first temporary income tax was
Theoretically,
imposed,
yes.
and we're still waiting for it to be repealed. But
Yeah.
there's a sunset clause coming any day now. I'm
Next
pretty
week.
sure.
Next week.
But so people were like pretty much on their own financially. Like
Yeah.
you either made it or didn't, and that was part of the beauty of the American system was,
Yeah.
people who worked hard made it, and sometimes you didn't because of bad luck, but still you were on your own. There was no safety
Yep.
net. After the Great Depression, a value set was put in place where there needs to be some kind of at least safety net, where at least you can get by, at least you're not impoverished, at least you're
Yep.
not in the street. And that is very different than it was after the Revolutionary War and the Civil War.
That's right.
And we've had this entire period of time where this, Social Security has been a thing, and everybody knows it's like it's bankrupting the country, but it's the one thing you cannot touch. It's been instilled upon us, like, you cannot touch that
Right.
that sacred calf,
That's
even
right.
though it's arguably the worst financial
The worst
plan
investment
ever
of all
devised
time.
by man.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's fundamentally in our DNA that you have to have this thing, which I don't know that it's going to last in the fourth iteration or whatever. I
Right.
I don't know how it could. It's literally one of the worst plan. Again, I'm not for removing everything, but this plan is like horrific. It's
Yeah.
absolutely terrible. Anyhow, so this idea that we shouldn't be completely vulnerable and exposed. Well, that's fine until you start importing 10 million people across the border. Then it just,
Yeah.
like, again, those meaningful but not effective policies, because the boomer, whatever I can't remember what their archetype is, the prophet, I think, is what they maybe are.
Yeah.
Is that what their archetype is?
Yeah.
Anyhow, it's clear that the values get instilled in the crisis, but when the next generation comes along, which in our iteration is the boomers, they don't like that values set.
Right.
They fight against that for the entire time that they could, from become the time they can become young adults, and then it climaxes when they are the people at the controls,
power.
the
Yeah.
power controls.
Yeah.
They are completely undoing the stuff before, but they don't have a great way to put a new thing in there. So they're great at destroying stuff, but not great at building stuff.
Yeah.
Historically speaking, and we've seen it in this generation.
Yep.
And so all this stuff is like beginning to come clear. And then all the things we talked about a minute ago about you use all these mechanisms that are just the worst parts of humanity that we use to make all this stuff happen and undo all the things that were established, all the institutions, and all these bad things happen. But it's really been a jolt to my system. Like I was never really aware that democracy really doesn't work through those areas. It is only good for the pothole kind of discussions, and gerrymandering is stuff you got to worry about, and like banking laws and oversight and regulations. It's fine for that kind of stuff, but real fundamental stuff, it's useless.
The big question. Well, the big questions are much. I mean, if you look at it just dispassionately and logically, the big questions are solved in more simple ways. So, and by that I mean, if you have a central figure that says this is how it is going to be, and nobody questions that, and then they do it, that's a very. It may not be good, but it's very efficient, right? It's incredibly
effective and efficient.
It's
Correct.
effective and efficient. In fact, you have now in our society, there's groups of people that are active monarchists. I don't know if you've heard about this, but that basically they're and a lot of them are on the right, if you will. So there is the notion these days that, yes, American democracy is broken. It's not coming back. We don't need a small government. I think what is it? One of the guys at the Daily Wire, not Matt Walsh, but Michael Knowles. I don't know if he's actually there, but I think he is one of them that prescribes, no, we need an activist central government that enforces our values directly.
Yeah.
And that, and there are people that will take that to the ultimate and say, we basically need to be an empire. We need, and it would not surprise me, honestly, if the next iteration of the next American Republic ends up being an imperial American Republic, because the boomers, they tried that, this democracy thing, this nation building thing, Iraq and all these other places didn't work. We're going to go there. We're going to enforce what we think is true here in America. And we are going to use our unquestioned military might to enforce it around the world. It's going to be an empire. And, 5 years ago, I would have said, that's crazy. That's never going to happen. I mean, we're too connected to, this idea of a democratic republic. Now I'm not so sure. There's serious people who are actively saying this is what we need next. And this could be then the response to this crisis that we're facing, whether it's a war with China, whether it's an internal social civil war, I don't know. But it'll be something, and it will be total war.
Like hearing you say that, I've not heard that. It's terrifying to me. That's the last thing I would want, because we've seen how our unchecked, ungoverned central intelligence apparatus and the military industrial apparatus and how they're great at toppling other governments, but it always ends up worse. Like how they do anything is how they do everything. The same way they fix potholes is the same way they fix, quote unquote, fix immigration. It's the same way they fix other governments, which is the same way they fix our tax code and the way they fix our healthcare system. Everything they touch turns to shit, and everybody knows that.
Yep.
So the idea of doing more of that's like the worst. I can't imagine the worst possible thing to do.
See, I think the monarchists would agree with you and what they would say, and I'm not, just for the record, I'm not one of them. This
is where your Evergreen State College is really shining through here. Really coming through.
I don't think they would like that either.
They wouldn't call it a monarchist, but if we just let the staunch leftists in charge, all 7 of them, everything would be just fine.
Well, sure. So here's the thing. in that scenario, you could have one of two kinds of essentially, total control empires emerge. It could be more of a socialist empire that the
Yeah.
Greeners would love, or it could be more of more of a conservative republic type empire. Now, the difference though between what you're talking about is currently the CIA and all the organizations that exercise influence, they have to do it sort of covertly and kind of, to
Yeah.
a certain extent under the radar. And they've got to do it within the confines of the Supreme Court and the Constitution. We can't get caught, all this kind of stuff. That wouldn't exist in a monarchy. In a monarchy, it would be, Afghanistan, we're taking over, and if you don't like it, we're nuking it. Well, we don't like it. Well, Kabul just went up in a nuclear explosion. There wouldn't be any
Right.
subtlety to it. A monarchy, in that sense, if it does end up like one of the many possibilities that could end up, it would
Yeah.
be a direct type of thing, not a somewhat subtle underneath the
Understood.
radar,
I got you.
pretending to be Americans still.
But they would, again, how the government does anything is how they do everything. They would aim for
Sure.
Kabul and hit Mexico City.
Well, and so then the generation following them would be like the generation following the boomers, who would say, or the
Right,
generation
right.
following the hero generation, say, you guys screwed up. It isn't working. And then we start all over again.
Right. So it's funny you talk about the green thing. Will the next iteration be a more socialist thing where the green thing is and again, I don't know this stuff. I barely graduated high school, but I would be willing to bet that if there was no money if there was no tax money that could be shifted towards green initiatives would cease to be a thing that people really push for.
Oh, sure. I mean, I don't care what
think
it is.
any of those
Money is
people
power.
Again, you can't have square miles of garbage floating in the ocean, and China and Indonesia and the Philippines and all these countries, just literally just dumping garbage in the ocean. But your number one concern is putting windmills in Wisconsin, like
And
that.
cow
That
farts,
can't.
cow farts are the real.
Yeah, and cow farts are the end of the world. All right. Anyhow, so it seems like we agree on this idea that democracy is good 85-90% of the time, but on the real big issues, it's really not the thing. Which I never
if it's been tried.
thought of that before.
I see. So the question is not necessarily is it good or not, but what actually happens. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, good or not is not the right way. Is it an effective legislative / governing tool
Right.
on big values, fundamental ideas, or again, I always use the word values, and I think the answer is no. I don't think that
it's because of human nature.
I don't think that there's a world in which the North and South could have legislated their way out of the Civil War. I don't think there's a way we could have legislated our way out of the Revolutionary War. I think the only thing that kept us from having what we have now, as far as the far left, far right dissension, and really just not friendships and family relationships are ending over this kind of dispute. The only thing that kept this from happening in the 1930s and 40s was the intervention of Japan bombing, attacking Pearl Harbor. There was such an outside influence that kind of preempted, because the left versus right, the way Neil Howe, again, the guy who wrote The Fourth Turning with Strauss, the way he describes, if you were an American in the 1930s, you either thought it was the best decade ever or the worst decade ever, depending on if you were left or right, because the government policies that were being put in place the left saw as these great social and economic parachutes.
FDR,
the right saw as being completely fascist and keeping your thumb on the man.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And that's, and there's, I think what's important, especially if you talk about the fourth turning in each generations, I think what's important for us and also for Kenny G in the future is understanding the inevitability of these cycles, understanding the inevitability of the outworking of human nature. Because it's not like we choose to have a crisis here. It's not like we choose to have a war. It's not like we choose to say we're going to suspend habeas corpus. We're going to suspend our normal workings of our government and do radical stuff. It's that these things are cyclically enforced on us because of our own nature and because of the way the universe is constructed. And so it's going to happen. And how it manifests, I think what we hope that for the future, that if anybody remembers this podcast, is that there are these patterns that happen over and over. And the question is then, how do we respond to the patterns in our individual lives and in our collective, in our collective life as a country? And that's what causes these things to happen. There's a certain, I don't know, fatalism and determinism are tough words, but there's a certain amount of sort of outworking that's going to happen no matter what we do.
Yeah, no, I don't have any belief that this is like what we're seeing now is any way stoppable. I don't believe that.
Right.
It does feel sad is not the right word, but
sad's a
it
good
feels
word for it. No, I think that's a fine word for it, Brian.
Yeah, I don't know that that's 100% accurate. I agree. I mean, it certainly applies, but I don't think it entirely fits. There's more to it than that, but it's frustrating. It's sad. It's disheartening. It makes you want to give up and like, why bother? And like, I'll just go spend time with my kids and like, but you can't do that either. So, and then the last thing it leaves me with, which is really, I think where I struggle the most is, okay, so then if it's not going to be a quote unquote democratic process, which I don't love that phrase because that's even the word democratic and democracy has been bastardized so badly now. In fact, we're going to talk about that next week on an episode. We did kind of plan the topic. The one of the guys we're going to be talking about, Mike Benz, he talks about how the word democracy used to mean protecting the will of the people, and now it means protecting the institutions. That's a fundamental shift that's happened. Anyhow, going back to your point about like the monarchy or whatever, and I think all of us kind of feel, I don't think there's very many exceptions to this, if any, that if my side was the monarchy, then it'd be cool. If the other side was the monarchy, it would be horrific. It'd be terrible. It'd be the end of the world. And then I kind of go, well, I'm just like everybody else then. I'm just the same guy who just thinks that my way is better than everyone else's.
Sure.
And history's proven that at least 50% of the people who think that are wrong.
That's again human. You mentioned earlier hubris. That these things, the people in power, they always think that even though we've gotten rid of divine right of kings, we kind of still have it if you go to Washington D.C. So hubris has always been there because we've
gotten rid of the title kings in the way we used to have a title. I don't think we've gotten rid of the desire that people have to want to be the king.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah. I mean, if I was in control, things would be a lot better off. But nobody's.
I'm 100%. I'm waiting for the phone call. Like if they just put me in charge of even like half the stuff, our lives would be infinitely better than it is now. There's no question. All right. Well, hey, thanks for tuning in this week. And as Dave said, go to unsilentpodcast.com or check out our Rumble channel. They got a great comment section there. We'd love to hear what you think, where you think we got it right, where you think we're completely like missing the point and like obvious things to you, or we're completely missing, or if we're not accurately explaining what this moment in time is like for future generations from your perspective. We'd love to hear what you think about that. So until next time, this is Dave and Brian signing off.
See you next week.
Do you want to be unsilent? Make your voice heard on our social media channels and share where you think we got it right or wrong. Go to unsilentpodcast.com for social links so you can join the discussion.